Imagine this. You're sitting in a crowded cafe, surrounded by the hum of conversation, the clinking of cups, and the glow of screens. Everyone seems connected, laughing, typing, scrolling. Yet as you sit there, a strange sensation creeps over you. It's not sadness exactly, but something deeper, quieter, more insidious. It's the feeling of being utterly alone in a room full of people. You glance around. The couple at the next table is absorbed in their phones, barely speaking. A group of friends is taking selfies, their smiles perfectly curated for Instagram. A man in the corner is typing furiously on his laptop, his face illuminated by the cold light of productivity. And you? You're just sitting there wondering why, despite all this apparent connection, you feel so disconnected. This is the paradox of modern loneliness. We live in the most interconnected age in human history. Social media, instant messaging, and video calls have made it possible to communicate with anyone, anywhere, at any time. Yet studies show that loneliness is at an all-time high. In the United States, nearly half of adults report feeling lonely. In the UK, loneliness has been declared a public health crisis. How can this be? How can we be so connected and yet so alone? The answer lies in the nature of connection itself. What we call connection today is often a shallow imitation of the real thing. It's a like, a comment, a fleeting text, a digital handshake that leaves no lasting warmth. We've traded depth for convenience, intimacy for immediacy. And in doing so, we've created a world where we're always together, but never truly close. But loneliness isn't just about the absence of others. It's about the absence of ourselves. It's about losing touch with who we are, what we feel, and what we truly need. In a society that values productivity over presence, achievement over authenticity, we've become strangers to ourselves. We scroll through life, numbing our inner void with endless distractions, never stopping to ask, what am I running from? What am I searching for? This is the great question of our time. Why does modern society, with all its technological marvels and social innovations, leave us feeling so profoundly alone? Is it the pace of life, the pressure to perform, the erosion of community? Or is it something deeper, something inherent in the way we've structured our world and our minds? To understand this, we must look beyond the surface. We must delve into the psychological and philosophical roots of loneliness, exploring how our inner worlds collide with the outer forces of modern life. We must confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, societal conditioning, and the illusions we've come to accept as reality. But before we can do that, we must first acknowledge the weight of this paradox. We must feel it in our bones, in the quiet moments when the noise fades and the void whispers. Because only then can we begin to unravel the tangled web of modern loneliness, and perhaps find our way back to each other and to ourselves. This is not just a story about loneliness. It's a story about what it means to be human in a world that often seems designed to make us feel less so. It's a story about the choices we've made, the systems we've built, and the lives we've lost along the way. And it's a story about the possibility of something more, something real, something true, something worth fighting for. But first, we must confront the hidden problem at the heart of it all. What is it about modern society that breeds this pervasive sense of isolation? And why, despite all our advancements, do we feel more disconnected than ever? The answers may surprise you, and they may change the way you see everything. Let's begin. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. To understand why modern society breeds loneliness, we must first confront a startling truth. Loneliness is not an accident. It is not a byproduct of progress or an inevitable consequence of technological advancement. It is, in many ways, a feature of the system we've created, a system that prioritizes efficiency over connection, individualism over community, and external validation over inner fulfillment. At the heart of this system lies a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. We are not machines, designed to optimize output and minimize downtime. We are not islands, self-sufficient and detached. We are social creatures, wired for connection, empathy, and belonging. Yet modern society often treats us as if we are the opposite. It rewards productivity at the expense of presence, competition over collaboration, and superficial engagement over deep relationships. This disconnect between our innate needs and societal demands has profound psychological consequences. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, warned of the dangers of living out of alignment with our true selves. He spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress or deny in order to fit into societal norms. When we ignore our need for authentic connection, we push it into the shadow, where it festers as loneliness, anxiety, or despair. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of existential depth, saw this crisis coming long before the age of smartphones and social media. He warned of the last man, a society of individuals so consumed by comfort and convenience that they lose the will to strive, to create, to connect. In his view, modernity's obsession with ease and efficiency would lead to a spiritual emptiness, a void that no amount of material wealth or technological innovation could fill. And then there's Arthur Schopenhauer, who saw human desire as a double-edged sword. We crave connection, but we also fear vulnerability. We long for intimacy, but we retreat into the safety of superficial interactions. This tension, Schopenhauer argued, is at the core of human suffering. In modern society, this tension is amplified. We have more ways to connect than ever before, but we use them to keep others at arm's length. But the problem goes deeper than individual psychology. It is rooted in the very structure of modern life. The rise of capitalism, urbanization, and digital technology has transformed the way we live, work, and relate to one another. We've become atomized, isolated units, navigating life alone in a sea of strangers. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, captured this sense of alienation in his famous line, "Hell is other people." But what he meant was not that others are inherently toxic, but that in a society devoid of genuine connection, our interactions become hollow, performative, and ultimately dehumanizing. We see others not as fellow beings to connect with, but as objects to compete against, judge, or impress. And then there's the role of technology. Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian novel Brave New World, envisioned a society where people were kept docile and distracted by endless entertainment and superficial pleasures. Sound familiar? Today, we are inundated with notifications, likes, and updates, tiny hits of dopamine that keep us hooked but leave us empty. We mistake these digital crumbs for real connection, but they only deepen our sense of isolation. Gabor Maté, the renowned physician and addiction expert, offers a compelling lens through which to view this crisis. He argues that addiction, whether to substances, behaviors, or even technology, is not a disease but a response to disconnection. When we lack meaningful relationships and a sense of purpose, we turn to external sources to fill the void. In modern society, this void is vast and our addictions are many. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of modern loneliness is how it disguises itself. We tell ourselves we're too busy for deep relationships, that we'll connect later. We convince ourselves that scrolling through social media is a form of socializing, that a text message is as good as a conversation. We normalize our isolation, rationalizing it as the price of success or the inevitability of adulthood. And so we drift further and further from ourselves and each other, unaware of the toll it's taking on our minds, bodies, and souls. Loneliness becomes not just a feeling, but a way of life, a silent epidemic that shapes our choices, our relationships, and our very sense of self. But why does this happen? Why do we, as a society, tolerate this state of affairs? The answer lies in the unseen consequences of our choices, consequences that are far more profound and far-reaching than we realize. The unseen consequences. Loneliness is not just a feeling, it is a force, a silent, invisible force that shapes our lives in ways we rarely notice. It affects our thoughts, our behaviors, and even our biology. It rewires our brains, weakens our immune systems, and shortens our lifespans. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness is as harmful to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, and dementia. It makes us more susceptible to anxiety, depression, and addiction. But the consequences of loneliness go beyond the individual. They ripple outward, shaping the very fabric of society. Lonely people are less likely to trust others, less likely to cooperate, and more likely to withdraw from social and civic life. This creates a vicious cycle. The lonelier we feel, the more we isolate ourselves, and the more isolated we become, the lonelier we feel. This cycle is exacerbated by the cognitive biases that govern our behavior. One such bias is the spotlight effect, the tendency to believe that others are paying more attention to us than they actually are. When we feel lonely, we become hyper-aware of our perceived flaws and failures, convinced that everyone else is judging us. This makes us even more reluctant to reach out, perpetuating our isolation. Another bias is the negativity bias, the tendency to focus on negative experiences and emotions. When we're lonely, we're more likely to interpret neutral or ambiguous social interactions as rejection. A friend's delayed response to a text becomes a sign of disinterest. A colleague's offhand comment becomes a personal slight. This distorted perception reinforces our sense of alienation, making it harder to connect with others. Cultural conditioning also plays a role. In a society that glorifies independence and self-reliance, admitting to loneliness is often seen as a sign of weakness. We're taught to tough it out, to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, to be strong. But this cultural narrative ignores a fundamental truth. Humans are not meant to go it alone. We are interdependent beings, wired for connection and cooperation. Denying this truth only deepens our loneliness. The digital age has added another layer of complexity. Social media, for all its promises of connection, often amplifies our sense of isolation. We scroll through curated feeds of other people's highlight reels, comparing our messy, imperfect lives to their seemingly perfect ones. This breeds envy, insecurity, and a pervasive sense of inadequacy. We feel more disconnected, not less. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of modern loneliness is its impact on our sense of identity. In a world that values external achievements over inner fulfillment, we often define ourselves by our jobs, our possessions, or our social media profiles. But these external markers of success are poor substitutes for the deep, authentic connections that give our lives meaning. Without these connections, we lose touch with who we truly are. We become hollow, fragmented, adrift. This fragmentation is reflected in the rise of what some psychologists call the false self, a persona we construct to meet societal expectations and gain approval. The false self is polished, performative, and disconnected from our true desires and emotions. It's the self we present at work, on social media, and even in our closest relationships. But the more we invest in the false self, the more alienated we become from our authentic selves. And the more alienated we become, the lonelier we feel. The consequences of this alienation are profound. It erodes our capacity for empathy, compassion, and genuine connection. It makes us more self-centered, more transactional, more detached. It turns relationships into transactions, love into a commodity, and life into a series of tasks to be completed. But the most tragic consequence of all is the loss of meaning. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, argued that meaning is the primary motivator of human behavior. Without it, we succumb to what he called the existential vacuum, a state of emptiness and despair. In modern society, this vacuum is all too common. We fill it with distractions, addictions, and superficial pursuits, but these only deepen our sense of emptiness. The question is, how do we break free from this cycle? How do we reclaim our sense of connection, our sense of self, our sense of meaning? The answer lies in a radical shift in perspective. one that challenges the very foundations of modern life: the rebellion. How to break free. Breaking free from the cycle of modern loneliness requires more than just superficial changes. It demands a rebellion, a radical rethinking of how we live, how we connect, and how we define ourselves. This rebellion begins with a simple but profound realization: the systems and structures that perpetuate loneliness are not immutable. They are human-made, and they can be unmade. The first step in this rebellion is to confront the illusions that keep us trapped. One such illusion is the belief that technology can replace genuine connection. While digital tools can facilitate communication, they cannot replicate the depth and richness of face-to-face interaction. The warmth of a hug, the subtlety of a smile, the shared silence of a meaningful moment. These are the building blocks of true connection, and they cannot be digitized. Another illusion is the idea that busyness equals importance. In modern society, we wear our busyness like a badge of honor, equating it with productivity and success. But busyness is often a form of avoidance, a way to distract ourselves from the emptiness within. To break free from loneliness, we must learn to slow down, to be present, to prioritize connection over productivity. This requires a shift in values. Instead of chasing external markers of success, money, status, likes, we must focus on what truly matters: relationships, meaning, and inner fulfillment. This is not easy in a society that constantly bombards us with messages to do the opposite, but it is necessary. As Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who we truly are requires us to reject the false selves we've constructed and embrace our authentic selves. One way to do this is through what Jung called shadow work, the process of confronting and integrating the parts of ourselves we've repressed or denied. This might include our need for connection, our vulnerability, our fears of rejection. By bringing these shadow aspects into the light, we can begin to heal the wounds that fuel our loneliness. Another powerful tool is mindfulness. By cultivating awareness of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, we can begin to see the patterns that keep us trapped in loneliness. We can recognize when we're using distractions to avoid connection, when we're projecting our insecurities onto others, when we're prioritizing superficial interactions over deep ones. Mindfulness helps us break these patterns and make more conscious choices. But perhaps the most important step in this rebellion is to rebuild community. In a world that prioritizes individualism, we must rediscover the value of collective belonging. This doesn't mean abandoning our individuality, but rather finding a balance between self and other. It means creating spaces, both physical and emotional, where people can come together, share their stories, and support one another. History offers inspiring examples of this kind of community building. The ancient Greeks had their agoras, public spaces where citizens gathered to discuss ideas and forge connections. Indigenous cultures have long practiced communal living, where the well-being of the group is prioritized over the individual. Even in modern times, movements like cooperatives, intentional communities, and mutual aid networks demonstrate the power of collective action. But community doesn't have to be formal or structured. It can be as simple as a group of friends who meet regularly to share a meal, a book club that fosters deep conversations, or a neighborhood initiative that brings people together. The key is to create spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued, where they can be their authentic selves without fear of judgment or rejection. This rebellion also requires us to redefine success. Instead of measuring our worth by external achievements, we must learn to measure it by the quality of our relationships and the depth of our connections. This might mean saying no to a promotion that would consume all our time, or choosing a simpler lifestyle that allows for more meaningful interactions. It might mean prioritizing presence over productivity and connection over convenience. Ultimately, breaking free from loneliness is about reclaiming our humanity. It's about recognizing that we are not isolated individuals, but interconnected beings who thrive in relationship with others. It's about rejecting the systems and structures that dehumanize us and creating new ones that honor our need for connection, meaning, and belonging. But this rebellion is not just an individual endeavor. It is a collective one. It requires us to come together, to challenge the status quo, and to build a new way of living, one that prioritizes connection over isolation, authenticity over performance, and meaning over materialism. And in doing so, we might just discover the ultimate truth about loneliness and about ourselves. The ultimate truth. The final, most powerful realization. The ultimate truth about loneliness is this: it is not a flaw, but a signal. It is not a punishment, but a call to action. Loneliness is the soul's way of telling us that something is missing, that we are out of alignment with our true nature, our deepest needs, and our highest potential. This realization is both liberating and unsettling. It means that loneliness is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be embraced and understood. It is a mirror reflecting back to us the parts of ourselves and our lives that need attention, healing, and transformation. But this truth also challenges us to take responsibility. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that we are not passive victims of modern society, but active participants in its creation. Every time we choose superficial connection over deep relationship, every time we prioritize productivity over presence, every time we numb ourselves with distractions instead of facing our inner void, we contribute to the very system that breeds loneliness. This is not meant to induce guilt, but to inspire agency. If we are part of the problem, we can also be part of the solution. We have the power to make different choices, to prioritize connection, to cultivate presence, to embrace vulnerability. We have the power to rewrite the narrative of our lives, and in doing so, to reshape the world around us. The ultimate truth about loneliness is also a reminder of our shared humanity. Loneliness is not unique to our time or place. It is a universal human experience, one that has been felt by poets, philosophers, and ordinary people throughout history. What has changed is not the nature of loneliness, but the context in which we experience it. In the past, loneliness was often a result of physical isolation, living in remote areas, being separated from loved ones by war or migration. Today, it is more often a result of emotional and existential isolation, being surrounded by people but feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued. This shift makes modern loneliness particularly insidious, but it also makes it particularly solvable. Because the solution to modern loneliness is not more technology, more busyness, or more superficial connections. It is more humanity. It is more presence, more authenticity, more vulnerability. It is the courage to show up as we are, to see others as they are, and to create spaces where true connection can flourish. This is not easy. It requires us to confront our fears, to challenge societal norms, and to take risks. It requires us to be uncomfortable, to be imperfect, to be human. But it is also deeply rewarding, because when we connect, truly connect, we tap into something greater than ourselves. We tap into the essence of what it means to be alive. The ultimate truth about loneliness is also a call to collective action. It is a reminder that we are not alone in our loneliness, and that we cannot overcome it alone. We need each other, not just as individuals, but as a society. We need to create systems and structures that prioritize connection over isolation, that value relationships over transactions, that honor the human spirit over the bottom line. This is not a utopian dream, it is a practical necessity. The stakes are too high to ignore. Loneliness is not just a personal crisis, it is a societal one. It affects our health, our happiness, and our ability to thrive as a species. Addressing it requires a fundamental rethinking of how we live, work, and relate to one another. But it also offers an opportunity, a chance to create a world that is more compassionate, more connected, and more human. A world where no one has to feel alone in a crowded room. A world where we can be our authentic selves and where we can see, and be seen in return. The ultimate truth about loneliness is that it is not the end of the story, but the beginning. It is an invitation to connect, to grow, to transform. It is a reminder that we are not meant to navigate life alone, and that the deepest joy and meaning come from sharing it with others. So the next time you feel that creeping sense of isolation, don't run from it. Don't numb it or rationalize it. Sit with it, listen to it, let it guide you back to yourself and to others. Let it remind you of what truly matters, because the ultimate truth about loneliness is this: it is not a curse, but a gift. It is a call to return to our humanity, to our connections, and to the profound beauty of being alive. And in answering that call, we might just find the thing we've been searching for all along.